Hello, everyone. Welcome back into another edition of SEC Talk. Not too much going on in college football this weekend, as we only had one bowl game of South Alabama and Western Michigan and Army and Navy. So it was a little dull on the college football front, but it's about to start heating up, especially with this week with the first round of the college football playoff getting underway on Friday with Notre Dame and Indiana squaring off. We'll have two SEC teams in action this week with Texas hosting Clemson in the first round, then Tennessee going on the road to the Horseshoe. And what is looking like if you're in the temperatures of 22 degrees the game time. So they better be bringing those heaters up there to Columbus. But with Wade, how's your weekend? We had a pretty eventful Sunday going to the Saints and Commanders game. But outside of that, how was your weekend?
Yeah, not much to it besides that. Just took it easy on Saturday and did not watch football, got some shopping done. And then, me and Tyler met up yesterday in New Orleans and went to the Saints versus Commanders game. We're able to score some last-minute tickets down low and got to see our former LSU Tiger, Jaden Daniels, in action, as well as a very impressive catch by Alvin Kamara right in the corner where we were sitting. So that was definitely a cool experience, and I'm glad we got to do that together, Tyler.
Yep, absolutely. So let's get right into the show. Probably going to be a condensed show, not too really much to get into. We're mainly going to be picking the first round matchups and also continuing our SEC fantasy, which if you were with us on last week's show, we did for the non-college football playoff bowls. But most of these picks will be from the college football playoff. But if you weren't with us last week, we did go through the SEC teams in the college football playoff top 25 poll. Just wanted to go through this pretty quickly as we head into the bowl season, into the college football playoff, where a team stands. So number 2 is Georgia. Number 3 is Texas. Number 7, Tennessee. So those will be the 3 teams representing the conference in the college football playoff. We'll see if one of them can hoist the trophy at the end of it. And then your teams really hoisting into the bowl games is number 11, Alabama. Number 14, Ole Miss. Number 15, South Carolina, and number 19, Missouri. So to conclude that poll is 7. We'll have the final poll, the AP poll that they release once the college football season wraps up, and see how many SEC teams finish it off this season. So as always here on the show, we want to get our fans involved. So if you have any questions pertaining to football, even though there's not really much football to be played other than the bowl games and the playoff, if you have any questions, feel free to leave us a comment, and we will get to it after a hot topic segment. All right, let's go back to our SEC fantasy draft. We picked our half of our team, and now we have to fill out the rest of our roster. And just a reminder, here is how the roster is built for the bowl season. So we get 2 quarterbacks, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, 2 defenses. So one half of our team was from the non-college football playoff bowls, and the rest will be from the college football playoff. So we had 3 teams to choose from, whether that's a player from Georgia, Texas, or Tennessee. Those are our options. So I had the first pick this week, and I decided not to go with the quarterback in my first overall pick, but the 2 quarterbacks are going to be involved in Saturday's games. You're going to be rocking with Quinn Ewers. When the lights get big, it seems like Quinn Ewers in these spots, he just has those big games. So you're going to rock with the Longhorns quarterback. And I'm going to go with Nico out of Tennessee against Ohio State. So talk about Quinn Ewers' matchup against that Clemson defense that looked pretty good in the first half against SMU, but struggled in the second half.
Yeah, Quinn Ewers, I mean, look, we only have 3 quarterbacks to pick from.
Yeah.
Carson Beck is out. We don't know the status of his backup. He also had a concussion. Wanted to avoid that situation. And Quinn Ewers, I mean, when he's on, he's on. I mean, he's a top 5 quarterback maybe in the country. And he's got his team on this stage. So I felt pretty confident in that pick. But I am a little worried that, Clemson's going to get a good pass rush on him, and they're going to have to run the football. But we'll talk about that in just a minute.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you mentioned, without Carson Beck here being in a selection, I just went with the second best guy in Nico. I think that if they are going to win this one in Ohio State, you know that you can just hand the ball off to Dylan Sampson, but I think that Nico's going to step up big time. So look for Nico to produce against the Buckeyes defense. So moving on now to the running backs, and I feel like this is like the best of the litter that you can get right here. These are have been the two guys that we have gone to in the SEC fantasy down the stretch with Quintrivion Wisner. So you must be thinking that Texas is going to win the matchup. If you have viewers in Wisner, I'm going to go with Dylan Sampson. Probably the same for me. I'm thinking that Tennessee is going to win their matchup. But last time we saw Wisner, a good matchup against Georgia. He had a good game, even though that Texas didn't really score too much on offense. How do you expect Wisner and this offense to bounce back against the Tigers?
Well, I like Wisner a lot. I was very high on him. I took him a few weeks ago against Florida, and he had 0 rushing yards, so I was a little hesitant. But since then, he has really just taken off and become one of the better backs in the SEC. So, yeah, I think even if yours doesn't have to air it out as much as he did against Georgia, I think that the ground game will be pretty potent for Texas. I feel good about their chances with Clemson. SMU, when they got going, I mean, they had no issue moving the football. So I like Texas in this one. And Tyler, I hate to be this guy, but the slides aren't sharing right now.
Oh, it isn't? Oh,
No.
Okay. All right. Well, let me go. I forgot to press the button. Let me go ahead and do that. Sorry about that, folks at home. But here we go. Yep, we're back here. Let's see. Yep. So you're gonna go with Wisner. I'm gonna go with the guy that was our SEC fantasy MVP, Dylan Sampson out of Tennessee. So I mean, we talk about Wisner every time he hits the field. It feels like he gets 100 yards. That's the same for Dylan Sampson. So I'm not going to spend too much time talking about the reason why. We know at this point what Dylan Sampson can do, and against that Ohio State defensive front that's been struggling down the stretch against the run. Yeah, I feel pretty confident about Dylan Sampson in this rushing attack going up against Ohio State. Now let's go on to the wide receivers. Dante Thornton Jr. out of Tennessee. That's a new face. We picked other wide receivers earlier, so we'll see if Dante Thornton can be that wide receiver 1 against Ohio State. I'm going to go with a new face as well, Matthew Golden out of Texas. We tried our luck, Isaiah Bond, and we just struck out and missed with those picks. So talk about your matchup. This is the first time you get to talk about Tennessee's matchup against Ohio State. So how do you like Thornton going up against a very talented secondary?
Well, Thornton, he's not your typical alpha receiver that's going to just get a bunch of targets, but he makes them count when he does get them because he's one of the faster guys in the SEC. He's a true deep ball threat. I know Ohio State has a pretty good defense, but I don't know. I just have a gut feeling that he's going to have 1 or 2 really big plays in this ball game. I do expect it to be moderately high scoring, and unless Tennessee just really can run the ball effectively. But I think that Tennessee's going to have to make some throws. I'm not saying Sampson's going to get shut down. We know he's very good, but I think that there's going to be times in this game where Nico's going to have to stretch the ball, and that's where Thornton comes into play. So, yeah, he's a new guy and a little bit of a boomer bust guy, but he did have over 100 yards against Vanderbilt. So, I think maybe he'll be an impact player.
Yeah, if you look at this, it's kind of interesting how we laid out these picks. You went with Quinn Ewers, I have his top target, and then I went with Nico, and you also went with his top target. So we're kind of balancing out those picks. Matthew Golden, like I mentioned, been the wide receiver 1 for the Longhorns. If it isn't Wisner running the ball for like 25 times, it has been Matthew Golden. He had over 100 yards receiving in that SEC championship game against Georgia. So he's been hot down the stretch, and I think that he continues that against the Clemson secondary. That's definitely gettable. SMU showed that in the second half. So I think it's going to be a high-scoring game, maybe a game that gets a little bit away from Clemson, especially you have to go on the road to a hostile environment in Austin, Texas. So I'm going to go with Matthew Golden. And now here's the make or break of the defenses. To me, I feel like we went with the 2 best defenses because with Tennessee going on the road, we pretty much just went with the quote-unquote home teams. I know that Georgia's going down to New Orleans, but let's be honest. Indiana and Notre Dame fans aren't going to outnumber Georgia in that matchup. So you're going to go with Georgia defense against that winner of whoever wins between Indiana and Notre Dame. So you'll have to wait for your points to come in until the second round goes off. And then Texas defense going up against that Clemson offense. Definitely have to worry about Cade Klubnik. But talk about Georgia. Who should really they should be rooting for between Indiana and Notre Dame. But I don't think if you're picking Georgia, you don't really care who wins that one.
Well, I mean, looking at the two first round games, Texas and Clemson, I felt pretty solid about Texas. I like your pick, but I was a little Texas heavy on quarterback and running back play. And, the Ohio State-Tennessee game, I mean, it could go multiple ways. And I just, like you said, it's a road game. I wouldn't be surprised if Tennessee wins the ball game. I think that they have the talent to do it, but that would have been a riskier pick. I think waiting until the second round for Georgia made a lot of sense to me, just because of who they are matched up with. Even if it's Notre Dame, it's not the kind of offense that scares you. I mean, it's the kind of offense that can beat you, no doubt. I think Notre Dame could beat Georgia, but I do think it would tend to be more of a defensive game. Indiana has a really electric offense, but I just don't have a lot of confidence in them getting through the second round. But pound for pound, this is a unit that I trust just as much as anybody in the country. So felt pretty good with the Bulldogs.
Yeah, it definitely feels like a safe option, especially with the question marks that they have on the offensive side of the ball. Georgia down the stretch, their defense has been good outside that Georgia Tech game, but that was just a wacky game. You never know what happens in rivalry game. But Texas feels like Georgia, you took them off the board. So I feel like I was stuck between Texas and Tennessee. And like you mentioned, you just don't know what that game's going to be. Could it be a low-scoring game? Could it be a game to go into the 30s? So I was going to go with Texas. I'm very confident that Texas is ultimately going to win this game. I'll be shocked if Clemson even keeps it close to me, honestly. I just think that Texas is just a better football team. But in playoff environments like this, you just never know what's going to happen. But I think that this Texas defense down the stretch has given me some confidence to pick them here. So I'm going to go we're both going to go with Georgia and Texas. No games to recap this week, though. I will give you the scores. Navy beat Army 31-13 in that game. Pretty dominant performance by the midshipmen. Navy will be playing against Oklahoma, and Army will now be playing against Louisiana Tech since, Marshall has a lot of opt-outs because their head coach decided to take the Southern Miss job. And also South Alabama won 30-23 against Western Michigan. No game picks result as well, though we are running a Bowl Mania pick. I picked Jackson State and South Alabama, so I'm 2-0. Wade, are you also 2-0?
I am 2-0.
All right. I think that everybody's 2-0 unless you're stupid and pick Western Michigan against my boys from South Alabama. But let's move on now.
The game was in Mobile when I picked it, so
yeah, it was in Montgomery. It's close enough to the campus. But let's go on now to the college football playoff games and pick them. We're not only going to be picking the SEC games, but we're also going to be picking SMU and Penn State. So let's move on to the first game to discuss, and that is on Friday, the lone Friday night game. So if you don't have any plans on Friday night, well, grab you a little cold one and sit down and watch a game that's probably going to be going back and forth between two teams that really have different identities on offense. But number 10, Indiana at number 7, Notre Dame. Wade, who you have winning the Battle of Indiana?
Yeah, it's pretty crazy that these two teams are facing off in an in-state matchup. They don't play each other. Yeah, no, maybe not even in basketball, because then Notre Dame doesn't even hold their own in that sport. So, this is just kind of a rare matchup. These two typically don't play in football. Like you said, Notre Dame is more of a run-it type team. Indiana's going to spread it out and really try to pass the football all over Notre Dame. But I'm just going to go with the experience of the coaching staff here with Notre Dame and being at home. But if Indiana is able to get their offense going, I mean, they're going to be hard to stop. But I just am banking on that Notre Dame defense finding a way to get some pass rush on the quarterback, and I think Notre Dame gets it done.
Yeah, this is definitely going to be a good one to kick this thing off here, and I'm going to be excited to watch these games because I've really been, raving about that the college football playoff should expand that way that we could get some home games at these campuses, and not only ticket price is going to be high, but definitely the atmosphere is going to get up there at Notre Dame Stadium. But yeah, like you mentioned, I feel like it's going to come down if Indiana can run their offense like they did, because they can't do what they did against Ohio State. So they might have to take some risks. Maybe if you get to like a fourth and two, 4th and 3, maybe get a little bit aggressive and go for it, because Notre Dame's defense is not going to give Indiana that many opportunities to score touchdowns. This might get it into a defensive battle. Indiana has a really solid defense, so they got a lot of transfers. So really, no playoff experience on both teams here. Maybe more on Notre Dame's side, but home crowd, I think, is going to be a difference in a lot of these games. I'm going to go Notre Dame. I've just really been impressed with Love, their running back down the stretch. He's one of the better running backs that we have in the country. And Riley Leonard, he has experience in big games. So I think that this is going to be a close game, a defensive game, but give me the Fighting Irish. And, of course, Jet's going to go with his Indiana Hoosiers to pull off a little upset here. So we'll see what happens. The winner of this gets to face the Georgia Bulldogs in New Orleans. So not an easy task for the winner of this game. So now we move on to the Saturday slate. Kicking off in the morning, it's going to be a whiteout between number 11 SMU at number 6 Penn State. SMU and Penn State both the runner-up in their respective conference championship game. So do we see an upset here with the Mustangs, or are going to keep it safe and go with the Nittany Lions here?
I mean, look, Penn State has the knack for not showing up in the big game. If we're taking a page out of college basketball's book, the 6 versus 11 is a tasty upset.
It is.
But again, I'm going to go with the experience factor. Penn State's played in Rose Bowls. They're playing at home. It's a whiteout. So, yeah, then they're used to playing at 11 a.m. SMU's been flying across the country to play 9 p.m. games in the ACC. Yeah. So I'm going to go with Penn State in this one. It's a vanilla pick, but honestly, if I see one being an upset, I think it's this one.
Yeah, I feel like this is one of the more likely ones, maybe the Indiana Notre Dame game. But I think if you want to call the Tennessee Ohio State game an upset, but I don't really see that on paper. But yeah, this is going to be a hostile environment. This game could be at 6 a.m. I think that the fans are really going to show out for this one. I mean, if you look at both defense rosters, I mean, Penn State should win this one pretty convincingly. But this SMU team has faced some big teams. They just faced Clemson. They placed BYU earlier in the season, and they lost to them. So SMU, as long as they can move the ball effectively through the air, because Penn State's secondary can really get after you. I just think that this offense, though, for Penn State is going to be too much for them. You have a 1-2 punch of Nick Singleton and Kaytron Allen. You have one of the best tight ends in the country. You just won the John Mackey Award. And then Drew Rowley, he's also, big announcement from him. He's returning for a senior season. So I think that this team's ready for a deep playoff run. So give me James Franklin's boys. I think that they get it done, especially with a whiteout. I mean, Penn State hardly ever loses in the whiteout games. So give me Penn State. Chet's feeling the upsets. He might have just came out of his cave for the playoffs and saved it, all the upsets for these games, but he's going to go with SMU. So Wade and I are keeping the green with Penn State, and Chet is also on SMU. Moving on to our first game involving an SEC team. It is the number 12 seed, the Clemson Tigers, the champs out of the ACC. They have to go on the road to number 5, Texas, the runner-up in the SEC. So, Wade, do you see an upset here? Do you think that this is just Texas just continuing on their march here?
I don't see much of a threat here. I think that Texas, as long as they don't get the nerves of being here on this stage, I think they get it done.
Well, they were there last year, so I don't know if any nerves will be here, but you never know.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're at home, but Clemson, I mean, look, like it or not, they've been a playoff mainstay, so they're going to be well coached and ready to go. But Texas did win or did appear in the playoff last year, but they did lose. I think they'll be ready. I don't think there's much to overthink here. I think Quinn Ewers can get it done. I think Wisner is a great back, and I think Texas just pulls away in this one.
Do you feel like the home team have more pressure than the road team in these type of games?
Yeah, I think there's definitely pressure that comes with it, but I also think they have a tremendous advantage. they're not just hosting, they're treating these like true home games. The home team gets like a 90% ticket allotment
Yep.
compared to the visitors. So I mean, it's not like a college baseball super regional or something where it's kind of standardized and they flip the coin to see who's the quote unquote home team. Like, this is a Texas home game. So yeah, I think that kind of alleviates some of the pressure, but I also think that because of that, yeah, everybody expects you to win. So that's why I'm a little bit fearful for some of the new teams in the playoff, but I do think Texas will get it done.
Yeah, this feels like one of the games that could just get away from Clemson. I just don't think that you can keep this Texas offense down as much. I mean, at some point they got to get rolling. I mean, Quinn Ewers can have as bad of a game as he did in the SEC championship game, but I mean, if they can't stop the rushing game with Wisner, and then if Matthew Golden has another big game, then yeah. I just don't know if Clemson has the firepower, especially with Texas defense as well that they've been playing. So this feels like a Texas runaway to me. And Chet's also going to go to Texas. So I think that a lot of people are going to be picking Texas to beat Clemson in this one. The final game features number 9, Tennessee, at number 8, Ohio State. And this is our SEC Talk game of the week. I'm definitely excited to watch this one on Saturday night between the Volunteers and the Buckeyes. Tennessee, good season for them, 10-2. Josh Heupel, fantastic coaching job in 2024. The superstars on this one, Nico and also Dylan Sampson for Ohio State, looking to wash out that horrific loss the last time we saw them against Michigan. So do you think that the Buckeyes get back on track, or are you going to go with Rocky Top to go on the road? And look at the ticket sales. Tennessee fans are invading Ohio State. So how do you see this one playing out on Saturday night?
Yeah, the ticket sales, and then the fact that Ohio State, lost to Michigan, it makes you think. But there's a reason why Ohio State was a consensus top 5 team going into the year, probably even top 3. And they narrowly lost on the road to Oregon. Probably should have won that ball game. Mm-hmm. And outside of that, they had a really good year. And I think, honestly, they would have maybe beat Oregon if they had a second chance at them in the conference championship. But they didn't do what it took to get there. So that makes me a little fearful picking them. But I am going to go with the home team here. I went with all the home teams. I think it's just a big advantage when the teams are this neck and neck. So give me Ohio State. Tennessee, they just sometimes seem way too one-dimensional on offense, and that worries me.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if Ohio State just contains Dylan Sampson, then Tennessee's going to have to find some answers, whether that's Squirrel White or Dontre Thornton Jr. I think that Tennessee and Ohio State, I expect this to be a defensive battle. If you're really looking for what's going to be the more low-scoring game, it's more likely going to be Indiana Notre Dame in this one in the horseshoe between Tennessee and Ohio State. But in the preseason, I asked you the question, who's my dark horse team? And I'm going to ride this team for as long as I can. Give me Rocky Top to pull off the upset. There's going to be at least one upset. Like, it's not just going to be all home teams winning this week. I'll just be shocked if that happens. I feel like this is the one that's gettable because I haven't really been too much impressed with Ohio State down the stretch, even in their wins. I mean, even against Penn State, they didn't look too good in that win. Oregon, I feel like was their best game, but they just had that blunder by Will Howard at the end. And I think the quarterback play, give me Nico, even though it's on the road. I mean, he plays in the SEC. So give me Tennessee to go on the road to beat Ohio State. And Chet's going to agree. So you're the lone Buckeye pick on this one. So we'll see how that works out in the standings. So those are our first round matchup picks. Now let's go on back to the bracket. So let's start with you, Wade. We're going to fill out your bracket, and then we'll go out to me. So let's start up at the top left. You had Notre Dame advancing on to the Sugar Bowl to face off against number 2 Georgia. How do you see that one playing out between the Dogs and the Irish?
Two very similar teams, in my opinion. Georgia's just banged up. It is in the Sugar Bowl, though. I think they'll have a lot of fans. Give me Georgia in a squeaker. I think they would just give Nate Frazier the ball probably 30 times.
Yeah, absolutely. So You got Georgia moving on to the semifinals. And now let's move on down to the Fiesta Bowl, where you have number 6 Penn State facing off against number 3 Boise State. Do you have the Cinderella story advancing, or do you have the Nittany Lions moving on to face off against the Dogs?
This one's tricky. It really depends how Penn State looks in their victory against SMU. You know that Genty's going to come out firing because, maybe he should have won the Heisman. But Penn State's better overall as a team. So I'm going to go with the 6-3 upset.
All right, let's go ahead and finish off this side of the bracket between number 2 Georgia and number 6 Penn State. Like you mentioned, Georgia is banged up, but do you see their run continuing on, or you have Penn State going back to the Natty? And it feels like it's been a long time since we've seen Penn State in the Natty. So you have Georgia or Penn State advancing?
Any idea of where that game is?
I think I really have no clue. So we have the Sugar Bowl, the Fiesta, the Rose, and the Peach. I think it's the Cotton Bowl and the Orange Bowl. So this one is going to be in the Orange Bowl.
Okay. I just can't put Georgia in there without Carson Beck. I mean, defense has been a little bit of a liability. They're banged up. I mean, this bracket just sets up really nicely for Penn State.
Yeah. All right, so yeah, number 6 Penn State being the first team to punch their ticket to the College Football Playoff National Championship. Now let's move on to the right side of the bracket, where you have the number 1 overall seed, the Oregon Ducks. A little bit of home advantage for them. They're playing in the Rose Bowl. You have number 8 Ohio State. So do you have Ohio State getting some revenge, or you have the Ducks beating them 2 times in one season?
I'm going to go with Oregon.
Yep, seems pretty fair to me. Now let's move on now to the Peach Bowl, where number 5 Texas face off against number 4 Arizona State. Arizona State could really say it has been one of the hottest teams in college football, but do you have the Texas Longhorns, a team that you were pretty high on advancing here?
Yeah, Texas is just too complete of a football team. Scatterboo is great, but I'm going to go with Texas in this one. So notice a trend here. It's the 2 best teams from the 2 best conferences that make the Final Four.
Yep, absolutely. So if this one's in the Cotton Bowl, then boy, oh boy, if we get this one. Number 1 Oregon and number 5 Texas. Who you got advancing to play Penn State?
If it's in the Cotton Bowl, I'm going Texas for sure.
All right, so you have a really not a chalky bracket here with number 6 Penn State, number 5 Texas. So do you have hoisting the national championship trophy at the end of this?
Might as well stick to my guns. Horns up, baby.
Horns up. All right, I'll quickly run through mine. Pretty similar to yours, to be honest with you. I have Georgia advancing past number 7 Notre Dame, so they'll move on to face off against the winner of number 6 Penn State, number 3 Boise State. I love Boise State, Nash and Genty, but I mean, maybe they have the home field advantage at the Fiesta Bowl, but I understand that they're going to be outgunned by Penn State's defense. So give me Penn State. And then I'm going to go with Georgia beating Penn State. I think that even without Carson Beck, I think that this defense is they're one of the best. It doesn't matter who's at quarterback. They could beat anybody. So give me the Dogs. I think that they advance back to the national championship. On the other side, I have number 1 Oregon and number 9 Tennessee. I love you, Tennessee, but your run ends here. Oregon is just too good of a football team to get bounced this early. So give me the Ducks. And then I also have number 5, Texas, advancing past Arizona State. And then also have number 5, Texas, beating Oregon. I have Georgia and Texas, part 3. And when it matters the most, Texas will beat Georgia in the national championship. So
that would be such a raw deal.
Yeah, it would be.
But only beat them one time and get the Natty.
Yep. That's usually how it works, though. It's hard to beat a team 3 times in one season. So we're both picking the Longhorns. Pretty consistent picks here from the SEC Talk crew. Now let's finish things off here with some hot topics. A lot has been happening in the portal, but some big news coming out of Baton Rouge. Garrett Nussmeier is going to be returning to LSU. Also, Michael Van Buren, the former Mississippi State quarterback, also is going to be transferring. So how do you like this quarterback room shaping out for the Tigers heading into the 2025 season?
I love the Michael Van Buren signing. That news broke yesterday, and we were together, and we were very puzzled by it at first, but I guess it makes sense on both sides. I mean, for LSU, you just took a quarterback from a rival or from another SEC team. I think that's a plus, even if he never pans out to be an LSU Tiger starter. It's a war of attrition, and you just took a weapon from Mississippi State and kept him from going somewhere else in the conference. So that was big. And then I think for Van Buren, you got to see the buy-in on his end. LSU's been as good at developing quarterbacks as anybody the last 6-7 years, and he's got a chance to still use his redshirt year because maybe he was thrown into action a little early this year, and he could have up to 3 years playing for what should be a top 15 LSU team year in, year out. So I think this is a good move. I'm a little curious to see what happens with Colin Hurley. Does he stick out? But we don't know what goes on in that quarterback room. If they felt like they needed an upgrade over the current backups, I'm all for it. And then for Mississippi State, I mean, look, you just got caught cheating on your guy. Like, you lost out on Jackson Arnold, as you see there in bullet 2, because you thought he was an upgrade over Van Buren. I'm not so certain he is. And now you have neither one.
Now you have Blake Shapen, so coming off of an injury to keep him out for the season. But yeah, Garrett Nussmeier, definitely huge news for this LSU offense. We'll see how they use, if they use Michael Van Buren. Maybe they use him in some sort of packages because he's a dual threat quarterback, and Garrett Nussmeier isn't he's a gunslinger. He's not going to run the ball as much as we saw Jaden Daniels last year. But yeah, I think that this is really look towards the future. And once Nussmeier is out, more than likely going to be Michael Van Buren stepping into that role. Like you mentioned with Colin Hurley, who knows if he's going to enter the transfer portal? We already saw Ricky Collins enter the transfer portal, so you just don't know. With the NIL and how much kids can get paid nowadays, you don't know who's going to be staying, who's going to be leaving. But good news if you're an LSU fan that Garrett Nussmeier is returning for his final season in Baton Rouge. Let's talk about another guy that's going from one school to the next. Staying in the SEC is Jackson Arnold. He's transferring to Auburn. There was a little bit of mumblings that he might go to Mississippi State, but it was Hugh Freeze that scooped up Jackson Arnold. He is a 5-star quarterback. He showed some flashes at Oklahoma. No longer you go with Peyton Thorne, and now you get Jackson Arnold. Do you see this as an upgrade, a downgrade, or a lateral move for Auburn?
I think it was a good move. There weren't many standout quarterbacks in the portal, and I think you're just banking on the potential here. I mean, everybody wanted this guy out of high school, and he still had a lot of competition. Coming out of the transfer portal, he would have still started for Oklahoma next year. So I think it's good. I think you got a bona fide SEC quarterback in there. I don't know if it's enough to change the tune of this team, but I do think it is going to get better naturally. Got Cam Coleman coming back as his number one target. I think you're going to have to replace Dreckwise Hunter at running back. I think he's a senior. So
he's gone.
I think this team is still mid-tier at best. I don't think this puts them as like a contender, but as far as a career-saving move, I think Hugh Freeze, definitely knew what was on the line, and I think he went out and got a surefire guy.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move on now to another transfer news. One of the more sought-out transfer wide receivers that hit the portal was Texas Tech transfer wide receiver Micah Hudson, and he's staying in state, going with the Texas A&M Aggies. And you're really looking at this A&M offense. No longer have Connor Weigman; he's in Houston. So you really look at the wide receiver group. Mike Hudson could really spin to this wide receiver one role. So how are you liking the way that this A&M offense is shaping? I know that the transfer portal still a lot to go. They could add some more weapons, but how do you like how Mike Elko is assembling this A&M offense for 2025?
Yeah, I think this is a great ad for Texas A&M. I mean, they didn't really have a true wide receiver one this year,
Right.
and really haven't in quite some time. Evan Stewart was kind of up and down, so I think this was wise, to get Marcel Reed, a guy that he can grow with into the next 2 seasons, really, because I think they're both only going to be sophomores. So not only do you get some experience, but they are 2 younger guys. It's not somebody that's just going to be gone in a year. Honestly, if I'm A&M, I'm probably going to go try to find another receiver because I just think, look at LSU. They're trying to double up with Nick Anderson out of Oklahoma as well as Barryon Brown. And I think that the more weapons you can add, the better for your quarterback and to just keep up with the Joneses a little bit within the SEC. So I don't think they're done yet.
Yeah, I don't think they're done either. So we'll keep an eye out on if there's any more wide receivers heading down to College Station. The final question of the hot topics for this week: which SEC team has the most approved during bowl season?
I want to hear your answer on this first. I'm curious.
I think it's Texas to me. I mean, they honestly have not too bad of a path to the national championship. We were just walking through it. I mean, they get Clemson in the first round, then they get Arizona State. I know they're a hot team, but on paper, I mean, that's a team that they should beat. And then you get what? Oregon. And if it's in the Cotton Bowl, I mean, hey, you can't really complain about that path. So I think that really looking at Texas, I mean, it was a dud of an SEC championship game. I think that there's a lot of expectations of Steve Sarkisian. This was a team that went to the college football playoff. They got bounced in the first round. So there's a lot of pressure to me on this team. They lose in the first round of the playoff. I'm not saying that like Steve Sarkisian is going to be on the hot seat, but with the talent that you have on this roster, you should be able to go deep. So I think that not only does Texas have a lot of pressure, but they have a lot to prove to me in the bowl season.
I'm going to go with Georgia as the team that needs to prove the most. I just feel like they won the conference, but they won it with 2 losses. We never saw, I would say, a complete effort from their squad this season. So I just think they have a lot to prove. And as an individual basis, they have tons to prove. You're going to have a new quarterback. You're ushering in a running back who's kind of come on the scene in the last 5 weeks or so. So I think obviously the brand is strong for Georgia, no doubt. If they don't win the national championship, nobody's upset about it with Kirby Smart or anything. I just feel like this is a different Georgia team than we've seen in years past. So by that definition, they got a lot to prove. But also outside the playoff, on the same line of thinking, who could benefit the most with a bowl win heading into 2025?
I think I got to really think about this one. I think it's Alabama to me. I mean, especially with the opponent that you're facing off against Michigan. If you lose that, it hasn't been the season to really that they wanted. I know that they were left out just out of the college football playoff between SMU and SMU. It was between Alabama, but they lost to Michigan last season. So I think if you can slay some demons heading into 2025, because just got some news. You had a star freshman quarterback is now in the transfer portal, so that's a big loss for them. Who knows if Ryan Williams is going to stay? Because if somebody drops the bag on them, then he might leave. So, but especially losing Jalen Milroe, I mean, who knows what this offense is going to be looking like? So I think that Alabama really needs to get this one because they need to build some momentum quickly heading into 2025 because they got the same opponents, but this time they have to go on the road to Georgia. Georgia's going to be better even without Carson Beck. So I think that Alabama really needs this one against Michigan, the ReliaQuest Bowl, to get some momentum.
And I'm going to go with the team that finished right behind them in the standings, and that's the South Carolina Gamecocks. Look at who they got coming back next year. You got your quarterback coming back. You got most of your wide receiver room coming back, most of your defense coming back. You are going to have to replace the running back production and the tight end production, but this team can win this game against Illinois and directly take that experience to next season and not have to rely on, ushering in a new quarterback or anything like that. These guys can win and feel it. themselves. And you also can't complain about missing the playoff and lose to Illinois. I'm sorry, it just can't happen. So you got to take care of business. And I think they do. But if they win this game, I mean, you could look at South Carolina being a top 15 team in the preseason polls next year, potentially even top 10. And you talk about schedule. Well, they get that Alabama team at home. They will have to go on the road to LSU and Ole Miss, but I think this team will be up for the challenge. And I think they go on. They would have to go on the road to A&M too. So it's going to be a tough schedule. They will get Clemson at home for the Gamecocks, but I think that this team could be one of the more cohesive units in all of college football because, for starters, they got their quarterback coming back, but also a lot of talent on defense.
Yeah, I feel like by the time that we talk about the 2025 season, South Carolina is going to be that sneaky team. They're going to be like the Ole Miss and Missouri in the Tennessees of this year. Like people like picking them to make it to Atlanta and compete for an SEC championship game, which, like you mentioned, they do have some hard games at LSU, at Texas A&M, but they get Alabama at home, which is always big. So we'll see if South Carolina – I think that their floor next season has to be making the college football playoff, especially with the talent coming back. But we have plenty of time to talk about 2025. We'll definitely talk about that closer into next season. But that is it for our college football playoff preview and picks. We're going to be taking the week off next week as it is Christmas week. So we wish everyone a Merry Christmas. Hope everybody enjoys their time with family and friends. We will be back on the 29th, previewing more than likely the semifinal matchups. We'll see how many SEC teams survive at that point, and then we'll also recap whatever bowl games that the SEC teams have been competing in. I know that the Gasparilla Bowl between Tulane and Florida happened on Friday, and we'll have plenty of others to talk about. So that'll be in 2 weeks. We'll be talking about that. So we appreciate everybody for tuning into this week's show of SEC Talk. So we will see y'all next time on the 29th for our next show as this football season winds down. So we appreciate everybody for tuning in, and we will see y'all next time. So long for now.